Recently, Portugal's Prime Minister Antonio Costa resigned over allegations of corruption in connection to lithium mining. Now, his offices were raided, and the president is seeking his replacement. He says he's done nothing wrong, but it brings up this question of a green scandal. So, we invited Alexandre Guerrero. He is a Portuguese political scientist and commentator to do commentary for us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to join you here.
Excellent. So, can you tell me a little bit about what you know about the downfall of Prime Minister Antonio Costa?
Well, it all started with an investigation made by the public attorney concerning the case of the concession that was given by his Ministry of the Environment in order to allow a certain company to explore the lithium business here in Portugal. Problem is that under Portuguese law, the company that can work and can explore lithium in Portugal, it can only be possible if that company at least has 35 years of experience. And the company to which it was given that right, that company was created only 3 days after the celebration of this agreement, which means that this could not be possible, at least under Portuguese law, to be celebrated. So the public attorney started to investigate what was behind this. And what the public attorney found was that it was not only lithium, it was only the hydrogen, and at the same time, a data center that was being built in the south part of the country and in the region. All these businesses had one person in common, which was Antonio Costa's prime minister, the chief of staff, who had already worked previously with former socialist prime minister José Sócrates, who is now being tried for embezzlement scandal. And at the same time, this person was kind of a facilitator in order to make direct contacts with Antonio Costa as well as with other members of the government in order to allow certain businesses to be done here, even if they violate or they pose a threat to the environment. For example, the Portuguese Agency for the Environment, that company had the need to issue a specific license in order to allow specific businesses and projects to be built and implemented in Portugal. However, that same agency, they always gave green light to all kinds of specific projects that had behind people connected to the Socialist Party in those companies. For example, this company that was created three days before the celebration of the agreement, they had as a financial consultant a former Secretary of State of a socialist government. So what's in common here is that we have the Prime Minister as the head of the government, and at the same time his Chief of Staff, although we don't know yet if he was actually one of the persons to gain any kind of benefits from these businesses. However, the Ministry of the Environment was always behind all these businesses. That's why we had this now minister that he resigned, but he was back then Secretary of State for the Energy that he now presently resigned, and he was formally and officially considered to be a suspect.
Okay. Now, this brings up so many different questions because, in Europe, where bureaucracy is the lay of the law of the land, Europeans, they love bureaucracy. I don't know how I would get away with anything being an expat here. But green projects are not highly scrutinized, and the European Union has so much money that they're throwing at it. So maybe it seemed like almost too tempting because of this appetite for bragging about green accomplishments. Do you think that's part of it?
Oh, absolutely, because what we see is that first, the European Union and each Union member, they create a need. They first start to prohibit and to ban specific kinds of technologies. Then they need to create the need, so the answer to that ban. And that's where we can see, for example, consultants that are nominated for specific and key positions in most of the companies that then are allowed to work on these sectors. For example, not only this green energy, but also if we take a look at public-private partnerships, it happens exactly the same. And this is where former members of the government, of not only the Portuguese government, but other EU governments, they can find a place to not only work, but to have a monopoly. So this kind of green need that we all now are hearing over and over each day, what this has behind it is that they want to create a specific need to which there are specific companies that will give the answers we need in order to address the climate crisis, so on and so forth. But in the end, we can see that there's not too much scrutiny, like you said, for example, from the scientific point of view. There are not enough evidences that the solutions that are being created and the bans that are being implemented all over Europe actually have any kind of scientific evidence and facts that are already confirmed.
Right. It's a solution in search of a problem, is what it
Indeed.
seems to be. And the EU, here's some of the numbers, has already committed to spending 270 billion euros for the Green New Deal by the end of 2030. Meanwhile, you and I both know the economy in Europe is not good. It's so expensive, getting more and more expensive. Do Europeans seem to know that this is not necessarily a good deal when especially we see these green initiatives that don't pay off and do not actually prove themselves to be better for the environment?
It only pays off for these companies and also for these former members of each cabinet, because they get not only the monopoly and the exclusive right to explore specific resources, but at the same time, they can still avoid any kind of competition in those sectors at the same time that they take political decisions, which means that it's up to them to choose if there are other actors to make part of that kind of business, and at the same time, if there is any kind of other circumstance that can help those companies to earn money. The taxpayers, they don't get any kind of money from here. For example, as we saw here in this lithium process, they don't get any kind of money. They are just going to pay to these companies. And that we can see, for example, not only in Portugal, but if we take a look at the Netherlands, the way they are destroying the agricultural projects that they have already implemented for decades in the country, in order and inspired by this Green Deal that they want to implement here in Europe, so on and so forth. So what we see is the taxpayers investing money in their own politicians and at the same time in companies. And that's a reason why we see more and more people trying to express themselves against not only this kind of Green New Deals, but at the same time against their own politicians. And that's how we see some kind of surprising results all over Europe, even here in Portugal.
Right. I wanted to ask you about this video that went viral a couple weeks ago about some Portuguese motorists taking these Just Stop Oil protesters and just dragging them off the streets and saying, we're not having this here. My favorite is a man who runs out at about 18 seconds with a hockey stick. My husband goes, who's playing hockey in Portugal? We don't have that much ice. So I wonder.
Rollerblades.
Right. It must have been rollerblades. Okay, that's what it was. We joke that I'm afraid of motorists in Portugal. They're very aggressive. And now that I know they carry these sticks, I'm going to be even more careful. But do you think that this is indicative of the Portuguese tolerance for these false promises of green initiatives?
Yes, I mean, the Portuguese people usually, we allow that, okay, if you want to save the environment and protect the environment, do it by yourself. But please don't push me to the same fight where you are. Don't take me to the same places and don't force me to make sacrifices in my own life, at least until we don't have replacements. How can we change cars? How can we change even our own clothes, for example, in order to change them for other options if there are no other options to this? So we need this in our daily life. So this is just what we call here rhetoric, because people, of course, everyone is in favor of protecting the environment, but please don't throw your garbage in the floor or to the seas. People are able to do this kind of sacrifice, I'll put it between commas, but not to sacrifice their quality of life that they enjoy presently. For example, sacrificing the use of cars, the use, for example, of not only mobile phones, but other means and other technologies that usually are connected with pollution, unless someone finds a solution. And people are sick and are getting tired of this because they are being dragged to this kind of fight, to this kind of struggle that they don't want to be a part of.
Right. It reminds me of the opposition to Salazar that he was not allowing enough progress for Portugal in relation to the rest of Europe. And so now environmentalists are sort of doing that, which they were critical of him for. I do want to ask you, though, about this group of left wing politicians in Europe now, because Antonio Costa was what maybe the Telegraph is calling the last of them, the last of this dream team that included Finland's Sanna Marin, Germany's Olaf Scholz, Denmark's Mette Frederiksen, from Malta, Robert Abella, Pedro Sanchez from Spain. I would also add Mark Rutte from the Netherlands. Do you think it's fair to say that he was the last man standing from the left and that we are now going to see this sort of European shift over towards centrist policies?
I don't agree with that just because this is not pure socialism. It was a mix between socialism and capitalism. I remember a story with President Emmanuel Macron where he said about Antonio Costa that it was quite surprising for Macron to find out that Antonio Costa was able to sacrifice the rights of the workers of the maritime ports in order to protect the Chinese investors' rights. And he said it was quite surprising to find some kind of socialism of this type. So to a certain extent, he is actually pure social ideology defender, so on and so forth. But to another extent, he wasn't that kind of socialist as we all think. I don't think even Mark Rutte, of course, he's a liberal, but at the same time, he's a liberal with very left views in certain particular issues. It's not just because Antonio Costa defended certain specific values and principles, for example, from the moral perspective, that could be connected and linked with the left wing, that we can call him a socialist. But his government had actually several groups, some more leftist than others. And Antonio Costa was actually part of one of the most right-wing groups from his own party. However, because everybody was earning, it was actually quite good, not only for him, but also for his party, because everybody was winning here. But I don't think he could be called the last man standing as being one of the leftists. I think that if we want to consider all the European continent as a whole, we have, for example, Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, yes, he's one of those, but I don't think we find much like him.
Okay. So some of this rhetoric about possibly, the Socialist Party having to work now with the right-leaning Chega party in order to survive. Do you think that that's rhetoric, or maybe indication that there will be more of a meeting in the middle?
No, it's highly unlikely that in the next elections that the Socialist Party will be joining Chega, because they actually belong to totally different ideologies. But what here brings me more curiosity is about the Social Democrats, because Portugal is the only case in the whole European Union where a Social Democratic Party belongs to the right wing. All others belong to the Socialist Party, not to a right-wing party. So, and until recently, the Social Democrats leader, he said that this was considered a red line. He was not going to form a coalition with Chega, whether a formal coalition or an informal coalition. But if he wants to rule, the only option he has is Chega. So what I believe here is that if Pedro Nuno Santos wins the elections in the Socialist Party, it is not so unlikely to see him win the elections. The problem is that it will be more likely for other left-wing parties to lose their votes rather than the Socialist Party. At the same time, I believe that Chega, of course, will increase a lot its representation in the parliament. However, in the end, if the Socialist Party cannot get a majority with his left-wing partners, then I believe that we will have to do more elections in order to find a clearer solution, because the country will get into an impasse where we have to choose. What kind of party do we want? Do we want the socialists ruling and they would be able to gain another majority, or we want the right wing to rule? And in case the right wing will have the right to rule, we have here a challenge, which is to see how close Chega can get from the Social Democrats, because Chega has been able to gather around its own party supporters, not only from the right wing, who are sick of this system, who are tired of all this, but also from the left side, which is actually interesting. And it's funny to watch, but we can actually get into a political unstable situation. And we might have more elections until we have a more clear solution for the country.
Okay, well, inshallah. Now, before we decided to discuss this, I'm an expat living in Portugal. You're in Portugal. We're both in the Lisbon region. And I had asked you, do you think it's safe to discuss this? And I think it's so sad that I have to these days, because we see free speech is being tamped down in Germany, in France, in England as well. And so, you still feel safe discussing these things, which is great. Can you talk just a little bit more about, whether or not Portugal's going to hold on to these freedoms?
Actually, I don't feel safe at all. I just don't give a damn now, presently.
Okay.
I'm absolutely sick of all this, because I have been persecuted by the society and by the system itself because of my positions concerning Russia. I have been losing opportunities to work in universities. People treat me like if I have some kind of disease and I can transmit the disease to that person. I have to work with the foreigner universities. So this is my condition now. So that's why I really don't care about what can happen to me, because I don't think it will happen more than this, because the Portuguese usually they don't like to push you and to tease you, and at the same time to sacrifice you and turn you into a martyr. But what they like is just to isolate you. They leave you on the side. And if you don't have friends, if you don't have opportunities to work, if you don't have any other opportunity to do whatever you want, then they believe, we here in Portugal usually believe that way you will learn where is the good way and how to come back again to the good way. So, but freedom of speech, of course, is in danger in some countries because of violence. Yes, it's true, in some European countries because of violence. Here, we don't have that specific kind of violence. Here, what we have is this strategy: isolate the person, leave the person alone, trying to lose everything she has, all the opportunities, and by that, trying to force the person to change her position. This is how people work. But of course, and not only, if I think about other cases, for example, I can look at the Portuguese society and I can see that if I want to develop my career, if I want to have a better quality of life, I must be a part of what we call mainstream opinion, because otherwise we will be considered to be a threat. And our system is not based on meritocracy. That doesn't exist. So it's a different kind of pressure, like the other kind of pressure that, for example, people see in Germany, in France, in Italy. Okay, that's way too strong and way too hard. But here we work more like that. So yes, freedom of speech is here in danger. When we see the attempts to create entities and regulations over freedom of speech, and at the same time for the social media, what we can and what we cannot say, when we watch these kind of initiatives, of course our freedom of speech is in danger. Even, for example, now recently with the situation between Israel and Palestine, for example, we can see that those who support a specific opinion and position, they get attacked, at least, or mocked in a certain way, that the goal is to put pressure on them and to make to put a label on the top of their head saying this person is an extremist. And this works a lot. Social pressure works a lot, and I believe that of course we are in danger. And here are the so-called European values, freedom. This is what we have in Europe. People, please don't fall in an illusion of believing that in Europe we are the land of freedoms, because we are absolutely not.
Yes. I agree with you, and I'm scared of it all the time. But you were brave to talk to me, and I appreciate it. I always appreciate your opinions. You can find Alexandre on his YouTube channel or on Twitter as well. Anywhere else you'd like to tell us about before we let you go?
No, I just want to say to people, please believe in the causes that you actually believe, even if you feel isolated in the middle of a group or of a social group. At least try to get evidence, because when you get evidence, at least no one can attack you for what you think. They have to attack the evidence, and that's way too important.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show. It's always a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure, Natalie.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.